Fill us in on what's going on with potential defensive backs, coaching changes, defensive coordinator changes. What's going on?
Well, things are fluid, and we were hearing yesterday that Torian Gray is out, and obviously Mike Garafolo said that as well from the NFL Network, and we haven't heard anything specifically counter to that yet. But you know, it's one of those where maybe it hasn't happened quite yet. Like the decision might have been made, but it hasn't been. Still go. And that's the kind of thing that makes you a little nervous when you've already reported, like, hey, it's done, which is what we heard. Like, we reported what we heard, that's how this business works, you know, and it's our job, obviously, to vet all sources and to go with people we trust. But someone we trust said, like, hey, it's over, it's done, and it's going to be part of a bigger thing. And then all of a sudden, late last night, you're like, oh, I don't know if this happened yet, because there's been no announcement. There's been no one else reporting it, which, you know, you trust what you do. But it's the thing we know 100% is this thing is very fluid. It is taking way longer. We also know what else is out there in terms of they've been interviewing people for his job. So we know that, which makes you feel good about the initial reporting, obviously.
Fine, don't worry.
The biggest question to me that remains, like, I don't think Torian Gray is coming back. I think the biggest question is who is. And is it everybody's gone? Is it partial staff change? And obviously the biggest question is Minuski, and that's the one we still haven't been able to figure out yet.
He's gone too. He's
I don't
gotta
know.
be.
Because here's the thing, EB. When they fired Joe Barry, they wind up with Minuski, who some people will tell you is actually a very good coordinator. There's a lot of people that like Greg Minuski in this team and around the league.
Didn't work.
But they didn't get the guys they wanted when they fired Joe Barry. And I don't think they want that again. And that's why ultimately we're leaving the wiggle room for them to reverse course here, because they could decide, like, oh crap, we can't get better. Never mind, everybody come back. Like, we're good. And it's like, who runs their team that way? I guess these guys do. They don't really care what anyone else thinks. They've proven that time and again. They're doing it, which can be a positive sometimes if you just do what you think is the right thing. I just don't know that would be the right thing. So it's a very weird, fluid situation, and it's ultimately going to be, if there is a new defensive coordinator, the new defensive coordinator is probably going to have some say on who stays and who goes.
Well, I mean, the writing's on the wall, as you say. They're bringing in guys to interview for Torian Gray's position already. We know, like, Bowles was brought in, right? So they talked to him about Minuski. I mean, they're interviewing guys for guys that have jobs. I mean, of course these guys are all gone.
Right, but their fallback could be they just keep the guys.
I mean, I guess.
Right, like, oh, crap, these other candidates suck. But, like, that's not – I didn't even know that was legal. Like, can you interview guys for guys' jobs that aren't gone yet?
I guess. Yeah.
I guess you can, but it's also bizarre. I will say this, you know, if all of a sudden, like, CK was like, hey, we're thinking about maybe revamping the morning show, and I'm using you guys as an example because, I mean, after 22 years, I think you got a little job security. But, you know,
keep thinking that. Not as much as you think.
It's always dicey.
Just don't swear today. You'll be fine. And if you do, make sure the delay's on. But, you know, if all of a sudden they were like, hey, we're going to interview Hoffman for the morning show, you guys probably looking around like, well, we're the morning show. Like, that's not really how business works. You know, if you were in sales and all of a sudden you're interviewing salespeople, like, oh, are we expanding the team or is my butt on the line here? So it's a bizarre thing in the NFL where there's pretty defined positions, especially for a guy like Todd Bowles. Like, he's coming to be the defensive coordinator. He's not coming to be anything else.
Yeah.
So if you're Minuski, like, I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Well, it's disrespectful to him, too, because give Minuski a shot to latch on somewhere else. It's disrespectful to the entire staff. Like, if you're going to move on. There's still plenty of great candidates out there that they could bring in. It's completely ridiculous. I don't
other
understand.
teams do it that way too, or is this
Not
specific
that I've heard of?
They move on and give them a chance to latch on.
I was going to say, I mean, this is probably just specific to the Skins.
I think in certain situations, these kinds of things have happened. You know, a specific candidate. I mean, look, the Raiders kind of did it to Jack Del Rio. You know, they interviewed John Gruden, and then we're like, yep, we want Gruden. Sorry, Jack. See ya. But outside of that, I can't remember it happening. You don't pay as much of attention to lower level assistant jobs that are going on around the league and the process for teams that you're not covering. But I will say I have not heard of this before where they are interviewing, they interview for an unspecified role. Oh, you mean the only one he would take, defensive coordinator? Like, what are you talking about?
Right. Well, who are the other candidates? We were talking to Charlie before, and he was hyping up the Tampa offensive coordinator as someone who's being sort of overlooked here, as everyone's looking for young studs. And then we posed the defensive side of the ball question to him with the Redskins in mind, and he really struggled to come up with a name. Jason threw out there Steve Wilks, and Charlie loved that name. Is Steve Wilks somebody they could bring in?
I wonder, and if they do, there would be nobody happier than Josh Norman, assuming that he is staying. That would be, I should say, if he stays, because Josh and Steve are really tight. I would be very surprised if Wilkes doesn't wind up back in Carolina, just because, kind of similar to why Bowles is going to Tampa. Bowles was Bruce Arians' DC in Arizona, and things were awesome. And so why would you not go back to the place where things are awesome if there's a chance for that to happen? So I would think Wilkes winds up back in Carolina with Ron Rivera, but who knows?
Yeah.
I think that he'd be the number one target. Like, he's really good.
Right.
But as far as we know, they haven't talked to him yet. They talked to this DB's coach. That was reported by Mike Cleese out in Denver.
That
was for a DB's
That
coach.
was Joe Woods.
Yeah.
Joe Woods.
I wanted to say Mike Woods, but I knew that wasn't quite right. So they interviewed Joe Woods for DBs, but we haven't really heard anything. So that's why I do kind of wonder if it was like, okay, if we can get Bowles, let's get Bowles, but if not, let's just stick with what we got, and maybe we make some smaller changes, and that's where Torian could wind up being on the outs. But ultimately, like, they're moving at a snail's pace, or keeping everything very secretive, which is also possible. That is, they're not talking to anybody right now. It is very, like, stuff, you're finding stuff out from outside. You're not finding stuff out from inside right now.
Maybe, and I doubt it, maybe they are actually a little self-aware in the sense that who's going to come, not only are they a terrible franchise, but who's going to come here when Gruden's here for one more year, right? So that makes it even 10 times tougher to get someone to come in here.
Potentially, but if you're Steve Wilks, let's say, I'll use him as an example, and you just got hosed out of a head coaching job after a year, and I use that phrase because, like, it was a year. What are you doing in Arizona? If you thought he was the guy a year ago, what changed that you don't think he's potentially salvageable now? But anyway, if you're him and you want another head coaching spot, is this your chance to prove yourself and come up and all of a sudden the offensive side of the ball is terrible next year and the defense is good and they fire Jay after 6 games, could Wilkes be elevated to head coach? Like, I think, and this is also actually, oddly enough, has an impact on Callahan, because Callahan's the assistant head coach right now. If you move on from Callahan on the offensive line and then bring in a defensive coordinator and also give him assistant head coach title and put him next in line, so to speak, you do wonder, could that be an incentive? But also then, how loyal are you to the head coach? Yada, yada, yada. It becomes very businessy instead of a cohesive unit. So there's a lot of complications there, but it could potentially, for the right guy, who Jay doesn't have as much of a relationship with but thinks is a very good coach professionally, could be seen as a positive, actually.